One forgotten name carved into a weathered Viking runestone has survived longer than the kingdom that first honored it. The king who ordered the carving vanished into history. His warriors became legends, and his wooden halls turned to dust. Yet fragments of his legacy still echo through modern Danish surnames. Most people never notice them. They sound ordinary, almost invisible. But behind some of Denmark's most familiar family names lies a world of Viking kings, sea raids, royal dynasties, sacred oaths, and battles that reshaped Northern Europe. The mystery is that Viking Age Scandinavians didn't use hereditary surnames the way we do today. So how can modern Danish names possibly be linked to rulers who lived more than 1,000 years ago? The answer is hidden in Old Norse traditions, medieval records, royal bloodlines, and centuries of cultural transformation. To uncover it, we have to return to a Denmark that existed long before castles, white romance, and bombards. And why we're so different than any other man who lived in this country. The times of light, each people are safe. The fact During the early Viking Age, Denmark was not a single unified kingdom. It was a landscape of competing chieftains, wealthy trading towns, farming communities, and ambitious rulers, constantly fighting to expand their influence. Loyalty was personal rather than national. A man followed his local lord, his clan, or the king who could promise protection, land, and glory. Every successful ruler depended on skilled warriors, willing to risk everything in battle. Those warriors carried axes, swords, shields, and extraordinary reputations. A name could open opportunities or create deadly enemies before a single weapon was drawn. Unlike later European societies, Viking Scandinavia relied primarily on patronymics. A son inherited his father's first name, not a permanent family surname. Eriksen became Eriksen. Haraldsen became Haraldsen. Olaf's daughter became Olafsdatter. Every generation introduced a new identity while preserving the memory of the previous one. Family heritage remained incredibly important, but it was spoken rather than written. Genealogies were remembered by poets, recited during feasts, and preserved in sagas long before they appeared in official documents. That tradition explains why modern Danish surnames often evolved centuries after the Viking Age, while still preserving ancient royal names. When permanent surnames gradually became common between the late Middle Ages and the early modern period, countless families adopted names that reflected fathers, ancestors, occupations, or places closely connected to Denmark's Viking past. The result is fascinating. A modern surname may not prove direct descent from a Viking king, but it often preserves the very names carried by Denmark's greatest rulers. One of the strongest examples is Haraldsen, a surname rooted in one of Scandinavia's most legendary royal names. Harald appears repeatedly throughout Danish and Norwegian history, but no king transformed the name more than Harald Bluetooth. His nickname has become surprisingly familiar in the modern world because wireless Bluetooth technology was named after him for his role in uniting Denmark, just as the technology unites different electronic devices. Yet the historical Harald accomplished something even greater. During the 10th century, he consolidated much of Denmark under a stronger central monarchy while promoting Christianity throughout his kingdom. His achievements are still visible today. Near the town of Jelling stand massive runestones commissioned by Harald himself. Often called Denmark's birth certificate, these monuments record his claim that he united the Danes and made them Christian. Few rulers anywhere in Europe left such a direct statement in stone. The surname Haraldsen literally means son of Harald. While most modern families bearing the name cannot trace an unbroken bloodline directly to Harald Bluetooth, the surname preserves one of the most important royal names in Danish history. Every time it is spoken, it echoes a king who helped transform Viking Denmark forever. But Harald's story is only the beginning. Another royal name became even more famous across Europe. The surname Knudsen derives from Ko, the Danish form of Cnut. King Cnut the Great achieved something extraordinary during the early 11th century. Rather than simply raiding England, like earlier Viking leaders, he conquered it and ruled an empire stretching across Denmark, England, Norway, and parts of Sweden. His North Sea Empire became one of medieval Europe's greatest political achievements. Yet popular legend remembers him for an entirely different reason. Many people have heard this story of King Cnut commanding the tide to stop. The tale is often misunderstood. According to later tradition, Cnut ordered the waves to halt, not because he believed he possessed supernatural power, but to demonstrate that even a king could not command. It was a lesson in humility directed at overly flattering courtiers. Whether every detail of the story is historically accurate remains uncertain. Its lasting popularity reveals something important about Cnut's reputation. He was remembered not merely as a conqueror, but as a thoughtful ruler whose authority reached across kingdoms. The surname Knudsen preserves that remarkable royal legacy. The real surprise came centuries later. As Denmark gradually adopted hereditary surnames, thousands of unrelated families independently became Knudsen, simply because an ancestor had been named Cnut. That means two modern people sharing the surname may have completely separate family histories while still preserving the memory of one of Denmark's greatest royal names. History rarely follows a straight line. Sometimes it spreads through ordinary families instead of royal dynasties. Another fascinating surname, connected to Viking Age leadership, is Gormsen. The name comes from Gorm, one of Denmark's earliest historically confirmed kings. Gorm the Old ruled during the early 10th century and is traditionally regarded as the founding figure of the royal line that ultimately unified Denmark. Although historians continue debating the exact boundaries of his kingdom, archaeological discoveries strongly support his importance. His burial mound at Jelling remains one of Denmark's most significant historical sites. Nearby stands another famous runestone, commissioned by his son Harald Bluetooth. Together, they form an extraordinary conversation across generations. One monument honors the father, the other celebrates the son's achievements. Few places illustrate the continuity of Viking royal power so vividly. The surname Gormsen literally means son of Gorm. Like Haraldsen and Knudsen, it developed much later than the Viking Age itself. Even so, it preserves a name associated with the birth of the Danish monarchy. Historians rarely mention how unusual Denmark's royal continuity actually is. Many early medieval kingdoms disappeared entirely. Others fractured into competing states. Denmark endured. Its monarchy evolved. Its borders shifted. Its language changed. Yet names connected to its earliest rulers survived every transformation. The next surname reveals another side of Viking society, one often overshadowed by stories of warfare. The name Eriksen originates from Erik, one of the most admired names throughout Scandinavian history. Several important kings carried it. So did explorers, nobles, bishops, and military commanders. Perhaps the most famous Erik connected to the Viking world is Erik the Red, the Norse explorer who founded the first European settlements in Greenland. Although he was Norwegian by birth and associated primarily with Iceland and Greenland rather than Denmark itself, His adventures became part of the broader Viking story shared across Scandinavia. His son, Leif Eriksen, would later reach North America nearly 5 centuries before Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic. That achievement changed our understanding of medieval exploration forever. The surname Eriksen, therefore, carries echoes not only of kings, but of extraordinary voyages into unknown seas. The Vikings were never simply raiders. They were traders, shipbuilders, explorers, diplomats, craftsmen. Their longships reached Constantinople, Baghdad, Iceland, Greenland, and the shores of North America. Each journey expanded the Viking world far beyond Scandinavia. The most fascinating detail is still ahead. Many people imagine Viking kings ruling through overwhelming force alone. The historical reality was far more complicated. A successful ruler depended on loyalty earned through generosity, wise judgment, military success, and the support of influential noble families. Kings hosted magnificent feasts where alliances were negotiated. Poets immortalized victories in verse. Gifts strengthened political relationships. Even succession to the throne was rarely guaranteed. Power constantly had to be defended. That unstable world shaped the names remembered across generations. As we continue exploring Denmark's ancient surnames, we'll encounter families connected not only to famous rulers, but also to legendary warriors, royal advisors, and noble houses whose influence reached far beyond the Viking Age. Some names survived because of military glory. Others endured because they adapted to changing times. Together, they reveal how fragments of Denmark's oldest royal history remain hidden in plain sight, waiting for anyone curious enough to recognize them. The deeper we travel into Denmark's ancient surnames, the more one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Viking kings rarely ruled alone. Behind every famous ruler stood trusted warriors, ambitious jarls, skilled shipbuilders, wealthy merchants, and families whose loyalty determined whether a kingdom survived or collapsed. Their names did not always appear in grand chronicles, yet many quietly lived on through the surnames their descendants eventually adopted. One of the most enduring examples is Svensen, derived from the Old Norse name Sven. The word originally meant young man or young warrior, but over time it became one of Scandinavia's most respected royal names. Several Danish kings were named Sweyn, including Sweyn Forkbeard, the fearless ruler who transformed Denmark into a military power capable of conquering England. Around the year 1013, his armies succeeded where many earlier Viking raids had failed. England briefly fell under Danish rule, laying the foundation for the North Sea Empire that his son, Cnut the Great, would later expand. Yet Sweyn's victory was short-lived. He died only weeks after becoming King of England, leaving his remarkable achievement unfinished. Even so, his campaigns permanently changed English and Danish history. The surname Svensen preserves the memory of a name once feared across Northern Europe. But military victories alone never built lasting kingdoms. Ships made everything possible. Without them, Viking expansion would never have reached beyond Scandinavia. That reality leads to another remarkable surname, Skov, a name associated with forests that supplied the massive oak trees needed for longship construction. Medieval Denmark depended upon skilled craftsmen capable of selecting the strongest timber, shaping curved hulls, and producing vessels that combined speed with surprising durability. A Viking longship was one of the greatest engineering achievements of its age. It could sail across the open Atlantic, navigate shallow rivers, and land directly on beaches where larger ships could never reach. The forests of Denmark became silent partners in every successful expedition. Families connected with woodland management and timber production often gained considerable importance. The surname Skov quietly reflects that forgotten contribution. Historians usually celebrate the warriors standing aboard the ships while overlooking those who made the voyages possible. The real surprise came as Viking society grew wealthier. Trade became just as important as conquest. Silver flowed into Denmark from England, the Islamic world, Byzantium, and the Baltic. Great trading centers such as Hedeby connected Scandinavia to markets in spite of this changing world, fate, and failing war. Old-fashioned boards of communism. One survey leaves its battlefield. It stands up above the city of the south, and surveys overlook the boards overlooked. Although the name literally refers to a grove or sacred woodland, it also became closely associated with important settlements throughout Denmark and southern Scandinavia. Sacred groves held deep religious significance before Christianity spread across the region. Ceremonies honoring the Norse gods often took place beneath ancient trees rather than inside temples. As Christianity gradually replaced the old religion during the 10th and 11th centuries, many of these sacred places evolved into Christian communities without completely losing their cultural importance. Families adopting the surname Lund often reflected geographic origins tied to these ancient locations. Hidden inside the name is the story of a society balancing old beliefs with a rapidly changing future. Another surname connected to Viking leadership is Jensen. Today it is Denmark's most common surname, originating from Jens, the Danish form of John. At first glance, it appears far removed from Viking history, because the name itself became popular after Christianity spread throughout Scandinavia. Yet its rise reveals one of the greatest transformations in Danish history. King Harald Bluetooth's decision to embrace Christianity gradually changed naming customs, law, education, and royal administration. Biblical names slowly replaced many older Norse names, while patronymic traditions remained. Jens became Jensen, just as Harald became Haraldsen, and Knud became Knudsen. The surname therefore represents not the end of Viking culture, but its evolution into medieval Christian Denmark. History is rarely about one civilization replacing another overnight. More often, traditions adapt while preserving pieces of the past beneath the surface. Another fascinating name is Rav, meaning raven. Few animals held greater importance in Viking culture. According to Norse mythology, the god Odin was accompanied by two ravens named Hugin and Munin, representing thought and memory. Every day they flew across the world before returning with knowledge of everything they had seen. Warriors admired ravens because they often appeared after battles, becoming symbols of victory, fate, and divine wisdom. Viking banners occasionally featured raven imagery, most famously the legendary raven banner associated with powerful Scandinavian leaders. Carrying the surname Rav does not automatically indicate descent from Viking royalty, but it preserves one of the strongest symbols in Norse culture. Sometimes an animal carried as much meaning as an entire family crest. Historians rarely mention how important symbolism was in maintaining authority during the Viking Age. Before widespread literacy, images communicated identity instantly. Ravens, wolves, dragons, serpents, and ships became visual languages understood across Scandinavia. The surname Rav quietly preserves part of that forgotten world. Another important surname is Torkildsen, derived from the Old Norse name Forketil, meaning Thor's cauldron, or Thor's vessel. The name honored Thor, the Norse god of thunder, whose hammer symbolized strength and protection. Before Christianity, children were frequently named in honor of gods, hoping they might inherit divine favor or protection. Even after conversion, many of these traditional names remained popular for generations. That continuity demonstrates how slowly cultural change actually occurred. Religious beliefs evolved, but families often retained familiar names because they had become part of personal identity rather than religious devotion alone. Archaeological discoveries continue revealing pendants shaped like Thor's hammer, buried beside early Christian crosses, suggesting many Scandinavians blended old traditions with new beliefs for decades. The surname Torkildsen preserves evidence of that remarkable transition. The most fascinating detail is still ahead. Throughout the Viking Age, political power depended not only upon kings, but also upon regional leaders known as jarls. These influential nobles governed territories, commanded warriors, collected tribute, and advised a king. Some possessed wealth rivaling royalty itself. Their descendants often became the medieval aristocracy that shaped Denmark after the Viking Age ended. Yet many ordinary families served these powerful households as craftsmen, sailors, messengers, scribes, and soldiers. Their names survived alongside those of the rulers they supported. Modern genealogy continues uncovering evidence that Viking society was far more diverse than popular imagination suggests. Not everyone spent life raiding foreign shores. Many never left Denmark at all. They farmed fertile land, managed estates, built ships, produced iron, traded goods, raised livestock, and maintained the economic foundation that allowed Viking expeditions to exist. Without them, no king could have financed a fleet or rewarded loyal warriors. As Denmark entered the High Middle Ages, written records became more common. Royal charters, monastery documents, tax registers, and land grants gradually replaced oral memory as the primary record of family history. Patronymics slowly evolved into hereditary surnames, preserving echoes of the Viking Age inside names that remain familiar today. Few people speaking those names realize they contain fragments of an era when Denmark stood at the center of one of Europe's greatest maritime civilizations. Yet the final surnames reveal perhaps the most remarkable connection of all, because they show how Viking kings left behind something far more enduring than treasure, castles, or conquered lands. They left names that continue to tell their story more than 1,000 years later. By the late Middle Ages, Denmark looked very different from the Viking kingdom that had once launched hundreds of longships across Europe. Christianity had become firmly established. Stone churches replaced many old wooden temples, and royal authority was stronger than ever before. Yet beneath these changes, ancient names continued to survive. They passed quietly from one generation to the next, preserving memories of kings, warriors, and Norse traditions long after the Viking Age had officially come to an end. One surname that reflects this remarkable continuity is Ulfsen, derived from the Old Norse name Ulf, meaning wolf. Throughout Scandinavia, the wolf symbolized courage, endurance, and leadership. Viking warriors admired the animal's intelligence and relentless determination. Norse sagas frequently mention men named Ulf, serving as respected warriors, advisors, and noble leaders. Although wolves inspired fear among medieval farmers, they also represented the qualities every successful Viking hoped to possess. Carrying the name Ulf connected a man to one of the most powerful symbols in Norse culture. The surname Ulfsen continues preserving that ancient legacy
even today. But the story becomes even more fascinating when we examine another familiar Danish surname, Axelsen. It comes from the personal name Axel, which evolved from the biblical name Absalom after Christianity spread through Denmark.
At first, this may seem disconnected from Viking kings, yet it actually demonstrates how Danish society transformed without abandoning its traditions. Viking families gradually accepted Christian names while preserving the old Scandinavian patronymic system. Sons still identified themselves through their fathers, even if those fathers now carried names introduced to the Christian faith. This blending of cultures created the unique naming tradition that would eventually produce many of Denmark's modern surnames. History is rarely divided by sharp lines. More often, one age quietly grows into another. Another surname with deep historical roots is Estridsen, one of the few names directly associated with a royal dynasty. The House of Estridsen ruled Denmark for nearly 3 centuries after the death of Cnut the Great's descendants. The dynasty took its name from Estrid Svensdatter, the daughter of King Sweyn Forkbeard and the sister of Cnut the Great. Her descendants produced a long line of Danish kings who strengthened royal authority, expanded trade, built churches, and helped shape medieval Denmark. Unlike many medieval dynasties that vanished without lasting influence, the Estridsen line left a profound mark on Danish history. Their reign bridged the gap between the Viking Age and the fully developed medieval kingdom. Few surnames preserve such a direct connection to Denmark's royal past, yet historians rarely emphasize how uncertain royal succession could be. Viking kings were not always succeeded peacefully by their sons. Rival claimants, ambitious nobles, foreign rulers, and even brothers fought for control of the throne. Alliances shifted constantly, and civil wars were not uncommon. In such an unpredictable world, family reputation often determined survival. A respected name could attract loyal supporters, while a disgraced name might disappear within a generation. That is one reason names mattered so deeply. They represented far more than personal identity. They carried memories, political influence, and social trust. The real surprise is that archaeology continues confirming stories once dismissed as legend. Excavations at Jelling, Leje, Trelleborg, Aggersborg, and Fyrkat have uncovered enormous royal halls, ring fortresses, burial sites, weapons, jewelry, and rune stones that reveal just how sophisticated Viking Denmark truly was. These discoveries show organized government, impressive engineering, advanced craftsmanship, and extensive international trade networks. The old image of Vikings as little more than violent raiders has steadily been replaced by a far richer understanding of their civilization. They were builders as much as hunkerers, lawmakers as much as warriors, diplomats as much as explorers. Their kings governed kingdoms that influenced the future of Northern Europe for centuries. Modern DNA studies have added another fascinating layer to the story. Researchers have discovered that Viking ancestry spread across much of Europe through migration, trade, settlement, and intermarriage. People living in Britain, Ireland, Normandy, Iceland, Greenland, and many other regions may carry genetic traces of Viking ancestors without realizing it. Yet genetics alone can never tell the complete story. Family names, historical records, archaeology, and cultural traditions all contribute pieces to the puzzle. Together, they paint a far richer picture than any single source ever could. That is why surnames remain so fascinating. They are not simply labels, they are historical clues waiting to be explored. At the same time, it is important to separate family tradition from historical certainty. Having a surname such as Haraldsen, Gormsen, Eriksen, Svensen, Jensen, Ravn, Torkildsen, Ulfsen, or Estridsen does not automatically prove direct descent from Viking kings. Many of these names became widespread because they originated as patronymics, meaning unrelated families could independently adopt the same surname centuries apart. Genealogical research requires careful examination of church records, census documents, land registers, and family archives before drawing conclusions. Even so, every one of these surnames preserves names that were once carried by rulers, warriors, nobles, or influential figures who helped shape Denmark's earliest history. In that sense, every bearer carries a small linguistic monument to the Viking Age. Perhaps that is the greatest legacy the Viking kings left behind. Their ships eventually decayed, their wooden halls disappeared. Many battlefields have been reclaimed by forests and farmland. Countless treasures were melted down or lost beneath the sea. Yet names endured. They crossed generations more successfully than swords ever could. Every time someone introduces themselves as Haraldsen, Knudsen, Gormsen, Eriksen, Svensen, Jensen, Ravn, Torkildsen, Ulfsen, or Estridsen, they unknowingly speak words that echo across more than 1,000 years of Danish history. Hidden inside those ordinary introductions are fragments of royal courts, Viking longships, sacred runestones, winter feasts, fierce battles, political alliances, and ambitious kings who dreamed of uniting kingdoms beneath a single crown. That may be the most extraordinary truth of all. History is not always preserved inside museums or ancient ruins. Sometimes it survives in something as ordinary as the name written on a passport, a birth certificate, or the front door of a family home. The Viking Age may have ended centuries ago, but its voices have never completely fallen silent. They continue speaking through the names that millions of people still carry today, quietly reminding us that the past is often much closer than we ever imagine. If your family name has a story worth discovering, subscribe for more forgotten history.